cats to constantly recreate a new narrative for themselves. Did that help Nietzsche? Didn't help Kierkegaard, by the way. Kierkegaard, remember, died at around 42 years old, depressed, used up his last money from his father, and collapsed on the pavement and died a few days later. Nietzsche didn't even die right away. He instead ended up going mad and lived for about 11 years in an upstairs apartment kept by his sister Elizabeth. And she frequently invited guests upstairs to see him. By the way, there's pictures of Hitler visiting Elizabeth at the house and standing next to the bust of Nietzsche. Elizabeth gave Hitler Nietzsche's walking stick, which he cherished. And Hitler believed in the Übermensch. He believed that all of the Aryan heroes of the Wehrmacht, the army, and the Luftwaffe, the air weapon, the Air Force, were going to be Übermenschen. And he insisted, instead of carrying a Bible around in your pocket, instead you should carry Nietzsche's book, Thus Spake Zarathustra. Thus Spake Zarathustra. And you're probably familiar with the theme that Richard Strauss wrote. And I'll play it for you now, hopefully. Everyone's heard this, yes? We're going to hear it now, yes? You already know it? Good visual effects, by the way. Sorry about the lack of bulb. Ends with an astronaut floating in space. The one use of that particular piece by Richard Strauss, it's actually a full-length, almost like symphony, tone poem by Richard Strauss, and that's just the opening bit. But the best use I recall as growing up was in the movie 2001, A Space Odyssey, which it's used 1, 2, 3 times, I guess, in the course of that movie. The theme is that you have a planet that's pre-human. You've got a whole bunch of hominids running around like apes. They're actually pretty poorly disguised human beings dressed up like apes in a desert kind of thing. And they're rooting around and doing things and stuff. And the one night they lie down and they wake up in the middle of the night, and there's this monolith, a huge black rectangle standing right in front of them. And they're absolutely bonkers over this thing, but they gradually all come up and touch it and look at it. And what happens after that is they invent tools. In fact, the first tool they invent is a club that they could use, a bone from a dead animal, and they use it in a fight over the water hole to kill other humans. So thanks to the monolith inspiring them, they come up with tools, and immediately, right away, they murder one another. And the tool is thrown up, and as it's thrown up into the sky, it converts into a spaceship, and that spaceship is just hovering, and you hear the Blue Danube music. But you end up with a group who are going to the moon to see something that's recently been discovered, and when the apes wake up and they see the stone, by the way, it's the music from Thus Spake Zarathustra that they hear, right, in the movie. The same thing happens when they go to the moon. They found a monolith there, and they end up uncovering this, and so all these different individuals are dressed in spacesuits walking down to look at this monolith, and of course it ends up kind of acting like a key among other planets. You know, it kind of turns a lock almost, and that loud noise occurs, but it's basically that same theme again. And then last, they actually send someone on the Discovery to Jupiter, and as they're approaching Jupiter, they discover that there's a big monolith sitting out there in space, and he enters into that, and that's the way that movie. And so the theme keeps popping up. There's probably lots of other places where that theme has been used. But what Nietzsche is trying to say is this is evolution, right? This is something that's evolving, and the man that comes down from the mountaintop, and by the way, Bettany Hughes actually visits the house in Switzerland where Nietzsche writes this book in the mountains, so you can actually see the mountains, see the lake, where he even had this thought, etc. And so it's kind of neat. I highly recommend looking at Bettany Hughes. It's about a half-hour long presentation on Nietzsche. Well worth watching. I would have shown multiple parts of it. God bless you. Sorry, can't help myself. The idea, though, is Nietzsche is aware of Darwinian evolution, and he thinks of the next evolutionary step is human beings who go through an educational process and come to realize that they're no longer sheeple, but they're instead responsible themselves for their own decision on what's important for them in their own life. And that you're the one, no escaping it. And remember, for Nietzsche, the dilemma is you can't just create value for yourself once. You have to keep creating new value for yourself constantly, because it's the feeling of that kind of creation that is what gives you that meaningful life. So you can't just make a plan, this is what I'll do for my life, I'll become a heart surgeon and save people, and invent new ways of doing heart surgery. Great plan, but if you become trapped in that, then you're no longer an Übermensch. You've lost it. You have to constantly create new meaning for yourself. That's the Übermensch. By the way, Heidegger, I should mention some other philosophers at this point. Heidegger is going to be a student of Husserl, and he's actually, a little bit, Hitler highly values Nietzsche and his concept of the Übermensch, and he wants to think of the Nazi regime as all Übermenschen taking over, and as far as Hitler is concerned, killing the Untermenschen, the men who are below you, certainly just like killing chickens, I suppose. Just kill the Untermenschen. It's the Übermensch that's important, and so you can see how Hitler's Nazis, how Hitler's SS, the Schutzstaffel, who were all tested to make sure that they were Übermenschen. They all have to be members of this Hitler's imaginary, Aryan race kind of thing. No such thing, by the way. Hitler was kind of a buffoon. I can't imagine any society actually electing a buffoon like that. Oh, well, wait a minute. No, actually I can. But, sorry. Is that unforgivable? I don't know. Yeah, that's a concern, isn't it? No, he was elected, actually. Hitler was elected chancellor, appointed chancellor, but his party, the Nazi party, was elected to office at the time. And he was appointed chancellor by Bismarck. In any case, the real philosopher of the right was Heidegger. Heidegger studied, as I said, with Husserl. Husserl was a phenomenologist. Remember, we used the word phenomenology in Hegel's book, The Phenomenology of Spirit, the study of the phenomena of mind or understanding, right? So if we're studying how our mind works, right, we're studying the phenomenology of Geist for Hegel. Well, phenomenology becomes a science on its own, and Husserl is one of the ones who gives us this, and Husserl gives us phenomenology. And my best example of what phenomenology studies and how it works was from my philosophy of religion class. Two of the textbooks that were required for that class was Volume 1 and Volume 2 of George Vanderloo's book, Religion in Essence and Manifestation. And the two books were like Volume 1 and Volume 2 of an encyclopedia of religion in existence and manifestation, in essence and manifestation. And what it did was it talked about blood. How do religions worldwide treat blood, which is such an important thing for human beings? How do religions worldwide treat water? What's the significance of water? What's the significance of death? And so on and so forth. So you can read through each section on, like you can go to death and you can go to how 50 or 60 different religions had special rituals associated with death and what they thought of death and things of that sort. And the important thing for a phenomenologist is that you go to people and you write down what they say about what they think, and then you put it in the book, and then you go to the next person and ask them what they say. And you write it down and you put it in the book, because you're just recording the phenomena as these people all experience it. And you try not to make any interpretations of what they say that phenomena is or what it means to them. A phenomenologist just kind of historically writes down the experience of phenomena to all these different people and so on. Fascinating, all the different types of religions. You have hardly any idea how many different religions are out there till you read something like that and discover there are things in common, and other things are completely different. And the values that come from those religions can be completely different as well. What's the value of life and things? Those turn out to be different. Today we might look at those and say that they're dependent on a lot of things, not only the narrative itself, but the narrative niched in a particular kind of environment. So if you're living in a desert situation, things are going to be very different than if you're living in an urban environment or a rich agricultural environment and so on. So those different environments clearly have an impact on the religion that people that survive in that environment experience, right? The local religions are fascinating. So if you study Alaska and you look at the different kinds of natives and their religious beliefs, we might not even think of them as religious necessarily, spiritual maybe.